Everyone, good morning. If councillors could take their seats, thank you. It would be appreciated. Thank you. Look, I'd like to begin this morning's meeting with recording the service of Ruby Fowler, who passed away 2 weeks ago now. Ruby Fowler served as a Christchurch City Councillor from 1986 to 1989. She was 98 years old when she passed away peacefully on Wednesday the 13th of June. Ruby led a long and eventful life, having been a teacher by profession. I knew her very well through the Sydenham Labour Electorate Committee. She was a stalwart of the New Zealand Labour Party. The time she served as a councillor was a period of significant change as the city prepared itself for amalgamation with the other local bodies operating in the city at the time. During this time, she worked on the South Christchurch Community Board and at the Sydenham Community Centre. Ruby was a strong supporter of libraries, their role in the community and the need for services to be accessible for all. In 1988, she facilitated the formation of the Friends of the Library, who are still around today. And the reason that she got involved with this was that there was some talk of the library becoming user-paced, and she was bitterly opposed to that occurring. Ruby remained an active member of the Friends of the Library until her health declined in her later years. At age 90, she called for a rates revolt and protest over the government sacking of ECAN councillors. Ruby Fowler made a wonderful contribution to her city. Hers was a life well lived. May she rest in peace. And could I invite councillors and others in attendance to observe a minute's silence in her memory. Thank you very much. I have no apologies or declarations of interest. The first item following those is the report from the Audit and Risk Management Committee, that the information is received, that we note the recommendations and confirm the authority of the Mayor and the Chief Executive to sign the letter of representation to Audit New Zealand. So would Councillor Manji, would you like to move that? And seconded by Andrew Turner. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. The next item that I would like to move is that we temporarily suspend standing orders under Standing Order 3.5, and the standing orders that we are suspending are that members may speak only once, limits on the numbers of speakers, general procedure for speaking and moving motions, foreshadowed amendments and lost amendments. Do I have a seconder for that? Andrew. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. And the next item on the agenda is the moving of the recommendations that are set out in my name. But before I do that, could I invite the Chief Executive to speak to the matters that have been identified in a number of the submissions and are being progressed by staff as operational matters, and then I will be asking you to note these in accordance with our consideration of the recommendation. So I'll hand over to Carleen Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just congratulations on getting to this point. I know it's been a significant amount of work both for councillors and staff over the last 9 months, and particularly tricky in terms of challenging in terms of balancing out all the issues that that you need to look at over that time. So we had more than 1,500 submissions, and as you know, heard 300 organisations and groups over that time. Over the course of that, not only did people talk about some of the issues and the content of the draft long-term plan, but also raised a number of issues, particularly around that our core business and getting things, the basics right. So we've put together a summary of some of the things that people talked about in terms of things that we can just get on and do. And so they're listed for you in this memorandum that I've tabled, and it's also on your advice on the Big Tin Can. There may be other things that we've missed, but generally I think it's a good summary of the things that people are talking about the way that we work and the things that we need to do with our community. So that's just to give you some reassurance that we've heard from those submitters and are already working on some of those issues, and we'll come back to you with clarity around some of those and the recommendations from your deliberations over the next few days with any other work that the organisation will just get on and do.
Thank you very much. Look, I'll just before I move the Mayor's recommendations, I just want to talk just a little bit about process so that people understand exactly what's happening today and then what will happen on Tuesday. So technically, from a technical point of view, the recommendations for amending the LTP are captured in Mayor's recommendations. So some of them sort of look like that they're sort of relatively technical, and they are. So it's not so much. It's more of a technical process to have them all on block and within Mayor's recommendations. There are elements within the that haven't been captured in the recommendations that individual councillors would like to test the meeting over. So there's and these are amendments to the recommendations. So we'll be accepting amendments to the recommendations at this council meeting today, and we will be voting on those today as well. There are, within the block of recommendations and within the LTP itself, there are elements that individual councillors would like to record their opposition to. They're not opposing the entire adoption of the LTP, and they're not opposing the entire block of recommendations. And so we're going to come up with a resolution that notes that individual councillors have recorded their vote against particular matters. It might be elements of the Northern Corridor, there might be elements of particular projects, whatever. And that's perfectly in order. So we're finding a mechanism in the sort of kind of block voting arrangement for individual councillors to express their opposition to elements of it. Nobody's going to agree to absolutely everything on an occasion like this, so we're looking at a mechanism to easily record how that might be best recorded for posterity. I tend not to do that myself because, as the Mayor, I have to speak for the decision of the council, regardless of whether I personally agree with the approach that's been adopted or not. And we will debate those amendments. We'll debate my recommendations, and then, all going well today, we will get to the point of adopting all of those, coming back, resuming standing orders, and then formally adopting the Mayor's recommendations as amended by the meeting, and noting the matters to be progressed by staff in the Chief Executive's memorandum to the Mayor as amended by the meeting. So there may be issues that we want to record in terms of the operational work that staff are doing as well. And then the last thing that we will do is adopt the information and documents set out in attachments C to H and L of the staff report. So the one report that we're going to hold on to is the infrastructure strategy, and we're just doing some tidy up of the wording of elements of the infrastructure strategy. That will then go to the audit office. They will have that on for Monday, and we will adjourn the meeting essentially till Tuesday morning. And when we come back on Tuesday morning, we will have the audit office sign off that we require to proceed, and then we will receive the audit report and adopt the long-term plan. And that is when we will all make our major contributions to the overarching long-term plan. So that'll be, if I was still in Parliament, it would be the general debate. No, actually it would be the debate on the budget. So the budget debate is a significant debate. You aren't getting what the MPs get. You'll get your 3 minutes to express your views about that. I think the process this time has been, I mean, it's been challenging, but it has been a lot better than it was the first time. There are a couple of things that we've had this time that we didn't have last time, and the first one is that we've actually settled our insurance for a global settlement. We didn't know what that was going to be, and we really didn't have any sort of overarching concept of our finances. So I'd like to thank staff for the incredible effort that they've put in. I know they've worked night and day. I know they've worked weekends, and it has been an extraordinary effort on their part to get to this point. So just with those, so we'll be adjourning today once we've dealt with the amendments, and we'll be coming back adopting our infrastructure strategy, and then completing that final stage of adopting the long-term plan. So, right, so on that note, I will move the adoption of the recommendations and noting the matters being progressed by staff and seconded by Andrew Turner, and I will open it up for amendments. And yeah, so amendments first. Sarah.
Thank you. I've got two amendments. The first is to bring forward the funding for Section 2 of the Expressway by 1 year, from 24-25 to 25-26, 23-24 and 24-25. There's two amounts there, and that's in response to the various submissions that we had, not just on the cycleway but on the Expressway in particular, and the speed limit down Portman's Road. And I've only moved it forward 1 year because of the pressure on rates in those first 3 years.
Good. Do I have a seconder for that? Dion. I'll just take advice. Okay. All right. So is there any discussion? Phil, Yanni, Andrew.
Is there opportunity to ask questions?
Yeah.
Yep.
Are staff in a position to answer questions on it?
Depends what the questions are.
Yes.
Exactly the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Phil, Yanni.
So my question really is, and like, if it doesn't alter the program, and we know we're going to get further funding from National Land Transport anyway, so that's a backup. And I'm supportive of getting the cycleways up, but I just want to make sure that in fact putting other cycleways forward isn't going to put other ones back, which we have, especially if we've already had interim agreement on those.
Yanni, did you have a question? Okay, more debate. Okay, the rates impact. I'd assumed that there wasn't a rates impact because it was bringing forward.
There is an impact in 2024, but there's no immediate rates impact because, assuming I've heard correctly, and excuse me because sometimes it's hard to hear, you were talking about bringing the Heathcote Expressway forward by 1 year, is that right? Yes. Okay, so yes, there is an impact in years 2025, 2026 and 2027, but no immediate effect.
So it does give us an opportunity to resolve things in the annual plan next year. Yeah. Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. And
My question
Phil's question, any impact?
We've forwarded a proposed draft resolution to Councillor Davidson on the connection between the Christchurch Northern Corridor and the Papanui Parallel, and what that foreshadows is that we, on the approval of the National Land Transport Programme, we would look at, through the additional funding that we anticipate, providing the connection from the Northern Corridor to the Papanui Parallel, and we can start work on that immediately. So it would be dependent on the...
Sorry, Richard, wrong cycleway.
Oh, sorry.
We're talking about the Heathcote Expressway, just bringing forward 1 year.
So no, that doesn't have impact on other cycleways in the program. So
No.
I thought you were talking about the other one.
Yeah. Because we're not planning on deferring anything to do it, we're just bringing it forward without any proposal to defer anything else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't impact on the delivery of the other ones.
Yeah. Okay, so Tim?
So I guess my concern is when you come back to us with the impact on rates, that would be my only question. I think there's a number of the others.
They've said that there is an impact, but it's 25, 26?
27.
And 27. So, I mean, we've got time to resolve that next year in the annual plan.
But any increase that comes in affects something else.
Yes.
So without a debate and discussion about what else that other thing could be, we're still adding things onto. So I mean, we've had a lot of time to discuss all of these things. So somewhere along the line, if we're going to add something, something falls off.
Yeah.
And I can't agree to adding something, not knowing what it is that's going to come off.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the debate. So, yep. Yep.
So the rate...
Yes. But then for the third year it goes down. Yes. So the increase is actually 0.02.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's the debate, and we can. I mean, we heard a lot of submissions on this one on the Port Hills Road and the dangers on that road. So, you know, I'm of a mind to support this one. So, there is debate on it. Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, I'm strongly in support of this. In fact, I'd actually like to see this one done sooner than that, but I appreciate that we do have budget pressures. This is one of the most sensible locations for a cycleway in the entire city. We've tragically had a death along that State Highway 74. I think it was a pedestrian. There are numerous concerns with the industrial traffic that go through this area. We're actually building a cycleway that's going to finish at a very busy intersection with almost nowhere to go. In fact, they'll be going contrary to the traffic that's currently coming one way past the tannery into Garland's Road. So, you know, this makes a lot of sense to do this cycleway. It will both be popular, I think, for commuting and also for recreation, and I think that's the key thing. That we heard a lot of submissions about people feeling safe, and having off-road separated cycleways, I think, is definitely the way forward. There is an irony about this route, and that is that when the development was approved for the Kenaway Farm site, there was a requirement to provide cycling and pedestrian access along the same river corridor. Unfortunately, a few years ago, there was a variation to the consent, and council agreed to allow some yellow lines painted on the road to stop parking, and a little bit of undergrounding paid for by the developers, and they got away from having to provide that public amenity for the cycle and the pedestrian. But this just makes a lot of sense. It's probably one of the least contentious cycleways that we will ever do in the city, because it's mainly off-road and it serves a very strong cycling community and recreational route.
Phil and Andrew?
Look, I'd really like to support this, I have to say, but there is a rates impact. And I think kind of like additional cycleways coming in at the last minute isn't really going to help our whole program. I think we need to take the public with us. We had a lot of deputations both ways on the cycleways. I'd love it to go ahead, and in time it will. Surely the answer is that when the National Land Transport Program comes to us, that we make sure that these much needed cycleways really go into that plan. And I have every confidence they would. But I think that would be a better process than deciding on one or two today. What has been raised earlier on the Northern Line, that makes total sense, and I'm sure I will support that when that amendment comes. But I cannot support this one, particularly because, sadly, there is an impact on rates, and I cannot agree with that.
Andrew, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, whilst there's some disappointment that we're dealing with an amendment at this late stage, we've had some good answers from staff on the rates impact, which is minimal and is in the further years out in the long-term plan. Obviously, we can deal with that impact if it requires smoothing in future annual plan or long-term plan processes, and it is a very small impact. We've also heard, as a result of questions to staff, that it doesn't involve pushing out any other cycleway or further deferral or abandoning any other project. So on balance, and I mean, the Port Hills Road is a road that I drive every day, and with the recent posting of the new 60-kilometre speed limit, it is a dangerous road. I've never cycled down that road, and I don't think I would want to cycle down that road. I can see that the impact of the cycleway for those that do, and we heard from a number of people in the Heathcote community in particular who will use that cycleway, I could see that the impact would be very positive. So given the minimal impact on rates, and the fact that it's further out in the long-term plan years, and given the fact that it's not impacting on any other delivery of the cycleways program, on balance, I'm supportive of this one.
Tim and Mike?
Thank you. Look, I think this is actually a priority. Raising the speed limit on this road is ridiculous, from 50 k's to 60 k's. If you see the city to surf, it is an absolute nightmare. My community is actually affected a lot more than many others with regards to the rat running, dodging the road of a million sets of lights. You think Chim Street's bad, what about Brougham Street? So my community has the trucks jumping on Cashmere Road, St Taurus Road onto Port Hills Road. So I know this well, and my community's told me and tells me continually that this is a problem, which it is. But we've also got a document here that we've put out to the public. We've started rates at 5.5% down over the next 10 years to 2.9%. So I would agree to looking at prioritising our cycleways in the regards not with rates but with safety needs, and this would be a priority. But I can't agree to this with any adjustment to rates over the next 10 years, because we have heard from our ratepayers, and it's the ones that have locked in incomes, the elderly or those on some kind of benefits, etc. With their own homes, they are struggling with 5.5%. So with the promise that we have given to go from 5.5% over the next 10 years to 2.9%, I'm sorry, I would agree to an adjustment with our priorities without any effect on rates, and so I can't at this stage support this.
Mike, then Glenn.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this amendment. The Heathcote Expressway was, it's been consulted with the community. We've obviously going to the tannery at the moment, but the last section has been delayed. This is a section in a community that actually wants the cycleway. We've heard from so many people when they submitted in person about actually how dangerous the roads are around Heathcote and the need for this cycleway. A lot of written submissions talked about this cycleway. It's actually really important that we move forward on this sooner rather than later, and like Jana, I also too would like to see it a little bit more forward, but we are restrained a little bit with the amount of rates we have in the first few years. But any opportunity to bring this cycleway forward, I think we need to leap at. It is important. We've got a lot of people now wanting to cycle. A lot of children actually want to cycle, but you know, in Christchurch we have double the average national rate of cycle incidents, and we can improve that for school children. We need to do it. So this is something I support.
Glenn?
Thank you. I'm confused on this. In the preamble to the LTP, it says we will also consider prioritising other cycleways, including Green Spine, which I put up in our workshops, of the Otakaro Avon River Corridor once the National Land Transport Program is announced. So does this actually potentially set a precedent whereby we could promote others? I mean, I would have liked to have promoted, because we still have to wait for this, right? Well,
This is the debate.
yep, I'm debating by rhetorical question.
Yeah. So I'll just say a couple of words and then give it to Sarah to wrap up. But I understand what people are saying about it. The reality is that we know that more funding is coming. I think that having heard the submissions, you can't argue against this one because of the dangers of the Port Hills Road. So I'm going to support it, but I'm going to say to staff that we've got to find a way of making sure that we get rid of that rates impact. I'm confident that we will, because I know that the funding's coming. And that's the difficulty with us doing our LTP now and the funding coming a little bit later. So I'm very supportive of it. Sarah?
Thank you. The Heathcote Expressway was due to be finished this year. That was the original plan. It was going to be finished in 2018, and for the community to have it pushed out when actually they really wanted one. And this one does follow a rail corridor, which does make it much easier, much less contentious. And it also serves not just Heathcote, but the tourists coming to the gondola, to Ferrymead Heritage Park. And there's a significant number of cyclists in Littleton who bus through the tunnel and hop off the bus and hop on their bikes again in Heathcote. And we heard from some of them as well that they would like this brought through. And I think at some stage finding a way for Littleton residents to bike through the tunnel would be amazing. But if we don't bring this funding forward, we not only continue to upset this community and put them in danger, but we have a hole in our funding in a couple of years for the major cycleways programs. So we've brought through a couple in the Mayor's recommendations already, which is fantastic, and brought them right up the front. And what that's meant is there's a hole in the funding, which means that we wouldn't be able to make the most of the NZTA funding in those years if we didn't have enough of our own funding on budget to do that. And so having this funding brought forward closes that hole. And the actual prioritisation of which cycleways get brought forward when we know the NZTA funding assistance rates will be done later this year when we know what those funding assistance rates are. It is it's a pain that we don't know those now. We can't budget for them. We know they're coming, but we need to do this. And I'd like to see this cycleway brought forward much further. And I'm sure that later this year we'll be able to have a look at that as well. Thanks.
Right, I've put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Can you put up your hands for no? East, Galloway, Gough, Clearwater, Scandrett. So that's carried. Thank you. We might as well deal, Mike Davidson, with your amendment.
Yes, so it'll just be, I guess, a noting provision on 5E1. Just at the bottom of that on the adoption of the NLTP, that staff report back to council on the cycleway connection between the Christchurch Northern Corridor and the Papanui Parallel, including risks and proposed program.
Is that, it's good? Yep. You're happy to second that, Pauline? Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Sarah.
Sorry, I just did another one. In the governance and decision-making processes section of the Mayor's recommendations, where it talks about the new reports and having some more clarity on our reports, I'd like to change the wording where it currently says, where relevant, address opportunities to demonstrate climate change leadership. And I'd like to change that to address the impacts of decisions on our climate change commitments. I'd like to acknowledge that many of the things we do have an impact on our climate change commitments, and sometimes those are positive and sometimes they're not so. And I think that acknowledging both of those is really important, not just the positive ones.
Yep, seconded by Vicky. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Who else had an amendment? Aaron?
I've just passed mine up for typing.
Oh, well, we'll wait till it's
Okay.
typed then.
It's pretty short. It's very simple, like
Somebody else had an amendment.
I had a noting provision, yeah. Which
Okay, well, would you like to?
just that one on the,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
Is that to go into?
My report?
Sorry?
Is that to go into Carlene's report, or is that?
Yes, is that what we agreed? The one
Yes.
over the carbon sinks?
Okay.
Yep.
So just move it as as a noting provision.
Okay, just this noting provision.
We can put it at the end.
That the council explore with the government opportunities for carbon sequestration by way of tree planting, including but not limited to the Green Spine in the residential red zone, the Banks Peninsula, the Worsley's Craycroft area, and other suitable areas in the Christchurch City District. There's already planting going in some places, but it's the intentionality of it that I think it would be good.
Carbon sequestration or carbon forestry, did you want to be part of the emissions trading scheme as well?
Is that what you're saying?
Gives you some additional money if you can.
Yep,
But it might be I mean, we can do it anyway.
Okay.
If this
Yep.
goes ahead, we'll do that without.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe to second that amendment.
Okay, so it's been moved by Glenn and seconded
Yep.
by Phil. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried.
Thank you. Also, just want to do a noting provision under parks, prioritising parks, that staff report back to council by December 2019 on the playground and recreational facilities network plan, including options for youth facilities in the Papanui ward.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Any other amendments? There was Yanni.
So just, I've been trying to get some information from staff over Heathcote and Oak Street. The streets are in bad shape, and the skirt repairs unfortunately didn't, well, they can't drain basically, and I would have thought they were a renewal priority. Staff have just advised that they're not on the renewal list, which was different to my understanding. But regardless, we're currently consulting on the Woolston Village Master Plan, so I want, noting that the council is currently consulting on the Woolston Village Master Plan WL1 project, and that depending on the outcome of that consultation, that consideration is given to aligning the Heathcote and Oak Street projects for cost efficiency and synergy by bringing forward the budget. So we've got a huge amount of work happening on both sides of those two streets, along Ferry Road and along the river, where we're doing the dredging, and there will be significant impact. Previously, the council resolved that the community board was able to come to council and bring forward the WL projects to get synergy, but we're in the middle of consulting, and so I don't want to predetermine the outcome, and I appreciate that we've got budget issues, It just would be really good to have a process by which we could actually, if it made sense because it was more cost effective and we had the synergy, that we could do that work together. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that makes good sense. Does anyone want to second that motion? Andrew? Any discussion? I'll put that motion. Oh.
Yes.
It's basically
It's only
the opportunity.
asking if there are synergies.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually require the work to be done. There's a report will come once the consultation's done on the Woolston. Have I
WL1.
heard you right?
So at the moment, we're in the middle of consultation on WL1. The council's previously resolved to enable the community board to request the bringing forward of the WL projects, if it makes sense. Part of the issues that have been raised through the consultation is lack of parking and removal of parking. There's been a lot of confusion over the side streets because there's yellow lines, and so it's basically just to enable council to consider. It would still have to come in front of council.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'd missed that it was only asking for a report, but it would actually increase the rates in year 3 by 0.01 and in year 4 by 0.02, and they would then drop in the subsequent years.
Yeah, but we would have to decide to actually proceed to do that. So that gives us it enables us to consider it in the context of the next annual plan.
So, and you'd probably save a third of the overhead.
Yeah.
Or the budget, because you'd have the same overhead rather than having 2 different procurements or 3 different procurements.
I think this aligns with my opening amendment or recommendation under getting back to getting the basics right. So she piling through all of these notes. Oh, I haven't got an updated copy. The very first recommendation under getting the basics right is that the council requests that when delivery of capital projects is being scheduled, that consideration is given to opportunities to achieve synergies with related projects in the same or nearby vicinity in order to deliver greater cost effectiveness and timely delivery across projects. And this one is in the process of being consulted on. So I think actually calling it out as an example of where that could happen, so it's not an actual commitment to the project right now. It shouldn't have a rates impact. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you, Yanni.
Right. I had some further amendments, but I don't know if you want to do them now or later.
Do you want to? I don't know. Sorry, I've lost track. Has anyone else got? Did anyone else have any amendments? Sorry?
It's commitments on the climate change one. The word was commitments at the end. Because the impacts of our decisions aren't on our policies. Yep.
Right, I'll make sure that's changed.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks.
Cool. Right. Aaron, you've got yours now, have you?
Yes, so mine is under page 8, bullet point 5.3. So it's just sticking with the Mayor's kind recommendation that was already there and just changing one word, which was in your recommendation had the word option to options, including traffic lights as one of those options.
I don't know whether the staff want to comment on that or not. I'm of a mind to think that that's fair enough. It's got to be one of the options that's considered. Okay, so, well, I'm perfectly happy to adopt it as part of the, we don't need to move it as an amendment. I'm perfectly happy to accept it as part of the recommendation. Yep.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kewen. Nice doing business with you. Okay, so Yanni, are we back to you now? Sorry, I haven't got all of your proposals in front of me. They're here somewhere.
It's from Andrew.
Hmm?
I think what Andrew sent them through.
So, Yanni, I would rule some of these out of order. So, so I just and some of them. I mean, the asking your vote being recorded. That we're dealing with that in a process. Right. So the one on unallocated DCs for Central City rebate. Being put towards the repair, rebuilding of council social housing units, I wouldn't accept as an amendment on the basis that we would need staff advice. We would need information in front of us in order to make a decision on it. So I don't believe that we could make an informed decision. I mean,
it would also be a policy change, I think, wouldn't it?
Well, so I've had repeated advice from staff. They've sent through the tables of the unallocated amount. It's also shown that there's been very limited uptake. I've had emails saying that we're carrying forward $13 million, I think, on these DC rebates. So I just would like some opportunity to definitely vote against the unallocated amount continuing and actually put it towards something else in the budget, or just take it off altogether. But I don't know what the best way to do that is. There has been lots of advice. We've had submissions in support of rebuilding our social housing. Yeah, I don't know. I seek your guidance as to the best way of dealing with that. If you just want to vote recorded against it, is that the best thing to do?
Vote recorded against development contributions policy.
Yeah, if that's what the councillor wants to do.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible for you to entertain an amendment at this stage on that issue. If the councillor wants to vote against it, he can.
But what's the? I mean, I'm just trying to understand the framing of.
Where is it in the recommendation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where does it sit in the LTP that he would vote against that?
It won't sit in the LTP. It will sit in the record of this meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So but if you're recording a vote against something, you need to be voting on something. And noting the previous advice around the forecast fund it's forecast that the fund will be spent by the expiry date, and it just doesn't sit there. We borrow as needed. It's a policy question.
So originally we've had the presentation from Regenerate Christchurch, and they were going to report back on the incentives blueprint Central City plan. Part of this was developed through that idea, and when we last heard from Regenerate, it was expected that we would be briefed prior to finalising the LTP, so that some of these things we could have a bit more evidence base. But
we had a discussion about this at the development forum yesterday. So I just think that I understand what you're trying to do, but we don't have the advice in front of us.
Right.
In
so
order
all I
to
was saying is there a process that we can get where we can actually make a decision based on how this thing is being used, the Regenerate reviewing the Central City plan, and actually
no,
the
it's
other
got nothing to do. You seem to have it in your head that development contributions that are foregone, so would have been paid other than for the rebate, is somehow money sitting on budget. It isn't. And I don't know how we can, we budget for it occurring, but it isn't money that exists. I mean, maybe if we could have a DC's 101 from the end of the table, because I don't know how many times it needs to be explained before somebody can understand it. Could somebody please...
I don't know if now is the best time to do a rebate 101 session as well. It's been explained to the councillor more times than I can count, and I just don't think now is even an appropriate time to do it anyway.
I wonder if the we're going to do as an organisation, we bring back the DC policy to council and have a workshop on it, and then some discussion around that.
That's a good idea.
But can I also add, though, that if this was to proceed, you'd be using ratepayers funding for social housing, which of course is what we don't do.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I'm not accepting that one. Hang on, I'm trying to sort out another one for you, Yanni.
There was a small one to do with Wolfston Playground, which I sent through last night. I've been trying to get information since Monday, so apologies for the late notice. It's a small local project with a relatively small budget, but it is quite frustrating that the project's been delayed, and there doesn't seem to be any ability to have a consideration of how it gets funded. So look, I've just raised it as a kind of minor thing.
Can we pop that into the chief executive's list as well, because we know that the money's been allocated to Thompson Park.
Yeah, but generally speaking too, we were told quite unequivocally that if you want to substitute something, it has to be in your own ward. So here we have a councillor that's trying to take money out of an adjoining ward to fund something in his ward. So as far as Glenn and I are concerned, we were very comfortable with the Horseshoe Lake and Thompson Park situation. And in fact, Glenn's found a bit of extra money for some planting. So I think the councillor should be looking for money from his own ward, a project in his own ward.
The trouble is that this is one of these synergy projects that there is work being done there, and the question is why can't the whole lot work be done as well? And that's why I'm just going to say that, can I just take that into the chief executive's one, and that they will do some work on how they could resource that final element of the upgrade land drainage issues in order to get that whole project done. So it was, yeah. I mean, so we'll just put it down as a...
Just to be clear, because I am a little bit concerned that the two councillors somehow think that I'm taking money off Thompson Park or Horseshoe Lake. Horseshoe Lake was deferred to enable Thompson Park to go ahead, and Thompson Park is about half the cost of Horseshoe Lake. So basically there's an interest component that's saved by not doing Horseshoe Lake, which is not something that I've put forward. That's the advice that staff have given, that it won't be ready to be done until a certain time. So there's actually an interest saving in that. So there was no desire to delay the Horseshoe Lake or reduce the Thompson Park budget.
Yeah. Look, I understand what you're trying to do, but let's leave it to the chief executive from an operational point of view to find a way of achieving that purpose.
Just a courtesy thing too. It took us by surprise, so we didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
As soon as I got the advice from staff at the Wolfston Playground,
Yeah. Yes, I was trying to sleep when that email came through. So, right. No. I think we're there. I think we've got all of the amendments on the table.
The number 4 about the Northern Arterial, there's some clarification. We didn't talk about that, did we? Sorry, I'm fluey today. So the Northern Arterial extension is currently under construction. The issue now is the downstream effects. Everything else is in process, so we can't vote against that. It's already been constructed. The downstream effects, I think, is what Councillor Johansson's talking about, and that's from Innes Road South. Got $10 million on budget for that.
Yeah.
However, I'm just
sorry. They're not amendments. Oh, sorry. I already said that we've got a process for dealing with that. Can we just take number 4 out?
Right.
It wasn't. Sorry, I hadn't noticed that it had gone up. Sorry. So you want to proceed with the Linwood Pool resolution?
Can I ask what the difference is between?
No,
what was there
you
before?
can't ask until I've got a mover and a seconder. So it's been moved by Yanni and seconded by Sarah. So that's the resolution. So I'm sure that Councillor Johansson will take a question through the chair from the chair of the Infrastructure, Transport and Environment Committee.
Thank you. Can Councillor Johansson explain to me the difference between enhanced value and what was there before, in enhanced value engineering through the chair?
Value improvement.
Yep.
Value improvement, in my view, signifies quite a negative outcome. I think actually enhanced value by seeking partnerships, which has certainly been a focus of the submissions, is a better way of saying it. So, you know, I think value improvement should be something we do across all of our projects. It shouldn't be just specified to one particular project. And, you know, I think that's the idea for this Linwood one, is that we do want to work collaboratively with the community, with people that have expressed an interest, and look at enhanced value. But I am concerned that the words value improvement have a different connotation, and that's why I've suggested an amendment.
Does anyone want to speak to this resolution? Pauline?
I think that the value improvement is actually the intention. I think it would be quite good to have both of the terminology in there, actually, Yanni, on your explanation, but the value improvement is actually, should also be across all our projects, because it's about delivering the same outcome but in a more efficient and cost-effective manner, and I think that was the intention, personally.
Yep.
Do you want to move that we do that across all the projects?
Hang on. No, we're in debate, and I'm going to enter into this debate now. So, does anyone else want to say anything? Sarah?
You know, the words technically mean kind of the same thing, it's just the implications are different. One seems a little punitive and the other one says, hey, let's do what's best. And I think that we should go for the let's do what's best option.
Okay. Anyone else? Right, well, I'm going to vote against this amendment. And the reason is that we sit around this table representing the city, not individual wards, not individual projects. We represent the city. And if we don't expect value improvement from all of our projects, then I just think that we're not doing our job as councillors. I think that the city of Christchurch expects us to get good value for the money that we expend. We are looking at partnerships. It's actually called out in the proposal for partnerships with other organisations that may seek to co-locate or co-organise their arrangements. You know, when you look at the opportunities for clubs to co-locate with a council swimming pool, I mean, what a fantastic opportunity it is for that whole park. You know, that whole area, the amenity will be lifted immeasurably. But we have to look at more cost-effective ways of delivering things. And that is not a negative. It's actually a positive. It's not a cost to the community. It's an investment in the community. So I would like the words value improvement to remain there, because enhanced value might actually mean the complete opposite, which is not looking for those opportunities to save money for the wider community of Christchurch. So that's why I'm voting against it. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. It's lost. Thank you. The levels of service for social housing, can we leave that till after we do the levels of service in the next iteration?
Yeah, do you have a time frame for that?
We've asked Carleen in this recommendation to come back.
Yeah.
I think by August, is it?
August or September?
September. 31 August.
And we will be on that. 30.
Yeah.
The
Well,
advice we've got.
proposals, yeah.
So we won't need to go out for another special consultation.
No, we would. We couldn't do this based on the advice that we have at the moment.
This is significant.
Yeah, this is a significant change. We couldn't do it off the back of this amendment. We couldn't just increase the levels of service for social housing by 500 over the next 10 years based on this. No, we can't change the levels of service. They drive the organisation. So we could certainly note that we have an aspiration to increase the levels of social housing in the city over the next 10 years and to look for partnership opportunities to achieve that, but we're not going to change our levels of service based on this. So you can leave it at that, or...
Well, if we're going to get a chance to reconsider it 31st of August or whenever.
Yep.
Cool. Let's do it then.
All right. Right. So I think we're done on the amendments. Good. Right. Well, look. Thank you all very much, and now we'll debate the recommendations as amended, and I'll just kick that off briefly. When I commented before on the introduction to this discussion today and talking about process, I actually referred back to the last long-term plan. And when I introduced the city's first post-earthquake long-term plan, and it was the very first long-term plan that the council conducted after the earthquakes, you might remember that just in 2013 it was a 3-year plan that was adopted, not a 10-year plan, and that was for very good reason. The same things happened in Kaikoura and Huranui. They've been let off their obligations to do the full long-term plan process because of the situation that they found themselves in. But that meant that the council was facing significant financial uncertainties, and as I said before, since then we've negotiated a global settlement of our insurance claim, and we have a much better understanding of our financial situation, but also the true state of our horizontal infrastructure. And I think for me it has been of real concern, and it has been all around this table. I know that every single one of you have expressed this concern, that the SCIRT program did not repair as much of our pipes and roads as the council had been expecting. So when the previous council went into the long-term plan and, went into the cost-sharing agreement with central government, they basically were confident that what they were signing up to was an agreement to fix everything that was broken and to share the costs of that on an equitable basis. So it was a 60-40 split on the horizontal infrastructure, excluding roads. It was basically an 80-20 split on the roads. It didn't cover footpaths, unfortunately, but it was a significant contribution to the cost. And what we got back after the SCIRT program was completed was far less than the repair of everything, and that's because the cost-sharing agreement was written in a way that really hadn't been properly interpreted by the previous council, and that was, it was only the essential network restoration that was covered by the 60-40 and the 80-20 split, and that has caused this council to reflect on the true state of its assets and how we're going to take things forward from here. And I guess that when we've listened to the submissions, we have heard over and over and over again, get back to basics, get the basics done, get the basics right. The basics was mentioned over and over and over again. It's about pipes, it's about roads, it's about footpaths. They're the priority for the city. Right now, we've got to get on top of this and we've got to get things right. They also said to us, because we did some trade-offs and said, have we got the balance right? And actually the people of Christchurch said, no, there's an element that you haven't got right, and that is you're prepared to compromise the wastewater. We don't want you to compromise the wastewater. And so address that as well. So we've put money on budget for the wastewater, we've put more money on budget for the roading and the footpaths, and we've really tried to focus on getting those basics right. The message also came through loud and clear about what we value in terms of our identity as a city. And on that note, I just want to mention chlorine. So when we started off down this process, we didn't know what we didn't know. The plan was pretty much locked down at the time that we had to make the decision to temporarily chlorinate our water. Our residents have come back to us and said to us loud and clear, you get that chlorine out of the water, and we remain committed to doing that. And that does mean that we have to increase our budget. We've brought forward the budget significantly in order to be able to achieve that. Another message that came through loud and clear was that Christchurch needs a fit-for-purpose stadium that can attract major sporting events, and the time is right to make that a priority. The government has signalled with the Capital Acceleration Fund that they've got money that they can bring to the table. I don't think the public of Christchurch were actually aware that the cost-sharing agreement had no financial contribution to the stadium from the government guaranteed other than the land. And so now that we know that they have money available to support us, we can bring the stadium forward in our budget. It's still not as far forward in our budget as it would have been if the original cost-sharing agreement had been adhered to, but we had to push it out when we didn't know what we didn't know. We feel that this gives us the time for central government to come in with the first tranche of the funding that's required. We are going to require others to join us in partnering to fund the stadium, because our contribution is capped at $253 million, and I'm certainly very interested in looking for options that reduce our contribution as well. So it hasn't been an entirely easy process. It has been easier than the last process in some ways and harder than the last process in others. I still don't think we've got the engagement with our community right. The hearing of submissions process, although it's an important part of the democratic process, I think we do need to find ways of reaching out, being where people are, at the supermarkets, at the various cultural activities and festivals and things all year round, perhaps with a presence that actually engages people in all of the issues that the council's involved in. So thank you very much for all of the hard work that I know that all of you have done, and I'd now like to sort of perhaps pass it round the table. So I'll start off with you, Vicky.
Is this what we were going to do on Tuesday?
No. Oh, these are the amendments.
Oh, just the amendments?
Yeah.
Okay, not the... And the recommendations?
The recommendations and the amendments, sorry. It's mostly the whole thing. Yeah.
No problem. So just in terms of where we've got to, I think there's been huge work that's gone into it. The bit that worries me about this, I think there's a great deal of brilliant work has been done. The bit that still concerns me is the debt headroom in this budget. And I think 7 years out from a disaster, we've learned that the scale of damage was, as you say, much, much higher than what the cost share and skirt catered for. The things, I don't think we would have got through this earthquake in Christchurch City had it not been for the very good state of the council's balance sheet ahead of the disaster and its ownership of assets. Because if we look at what CCHL has been able to provide, it's been amazing. I agree completely that the chlorine has to be taken out, and it's great that the money has been brought forward. I love the fact that we've put in a loan for social housing so that it's rates neutral, but it means that that we are still continuing to build social housing. I think that's really, really important if you look at the fact that the demand for social housing is going to increase and increase and increase over the next 30 years. I love the fact that we've got the shared equity fund in there for to help people buy their first house. That will be unique, I think, in New Zealand, and the RFP has gone out to providers for that this week, which is fantastic. I love the fact that we've started an internship program in this budget to help people who are not in employment educational training, and I really like the fact that we've got the green prescription continuing and that we've helped EnviroService. Recycling remains a huge problem for every council in New Zealand and probably many around the world in terms of how we recycle our recyclables, given that China has closed its doors and that the market has been flooded. We have a big challenge ahead of us in that. I like the fact that we've maintained the momentum in this long-term plan. I think it's really important that we maintain a sense of hope and confidence and optimism and the whole thing about anything is possible, and that this is a city of opportunity. I think there are things that we would love to have addressed. I would love to have addressed water bottling and the fact that it should not be allowed to be, it's a resource that should not be allowed to be taken and should not be allowed to be put into bottles of plastic which may be manufactured on site. Those things give me the heebie-jeebies and are just not part of what we want for the city. But in terms of, have we looked at the basics, addressed those, addressed the key issues and tried to move the city forward in a way that is about Christchurch and the inclusiveness that is Christchurch and the social equality that we want to provide and the social inclusiveness that we want to provide to make this a great place for everybody who lives here to live here. So I think it's actually really good. And I've finished my time.
Perfect timing. Yanni.
I just want to be clear, you want us to do the whole thing or just the amendments today?
It's the Mayor's recommendations as amended.
Right. Okay. So,
It's going to be generally when we come back, we'll probably debate the same things, but you know, I mean, it's the Mayor's recommendations as amended.
No,
we don't have to.
No, we'll just do it today.
We'll just do it today. Okay.
I'll stick to the high level, apart from a few local issues. Look, I mean, I think, you know, like the reality is, what's come through really clearly is I still think we're a city divided. There's a city of people that see the future, that have it pretty good and see the opportunity and love the kind of glitz and the glamour of what's ahead. And then there's a side of the city that's still struggling with the impact of the earthquakes all these years on. Part of the problem, as I see it, has been that the original financial strategy of council was to, while the repairs were being done, was to do renewals at the same time rather than duplicate projects. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. In fact, the opposite has happened, and the worst has happened in that the repairs that we got have meant that some streets can't drain properly, that they're deteriorating quicker than they would have otherwise. And so a lot of the money that's been spent from Skirt program has actually left things in a much worse condition than was anticipated, which means we've got a huge cost going forward. There's still, I think, a huge challenge in the city between looking after the basic needs of people like housing, community funding, and local facilities versus the central city and the huge expense that's been put into things like the stadium. So I really think I commend the Mayor for coming up with a number of recommendations to try and address getting synergy. You know, often we're told that things are going to cost more, and the idea that we should only value improve one project, I think, is a little bit sad. In fact, we should be looking at a number of opportunities to save money and reduce costs, and I think there's ways in which we can do that, and I've sent my colleagues 2 examples last night, but I could list many more. I think one of the concerns I have is we're not finishing existing cycleways and we're starting new ones, and I really kind of struggle with that. I would have thought it was sensible to get a cycleway complete in its total if you want to see the impact, but we're not doing that, which is sad. So finally, I just want to address the issues in Linwood, because I do think that you know, I am sad that we value improving the Linwood facility when we haven't done that for any of the others, and I think it sends quite a negative connotation. This is a community that just recently had a Salvation Army report saying that it felt forgotten and that its voices weren't being heard. Through this process, we've had a number of submissions in support and welcoming the Linwood-Wolston poll, and yet we've come up with what I believe is quite a negative amendment. It's a community that's had its bus services just cut yesterday by ECAN in some parts, and it's a community that's struggling to get the basics fixed post-earthquake. So, yeah, I was really sad that we've passed that amendment. I don't think it sends a good signal that they should have to do with less when others are getting more. But that's my time up. So thank you for the work that's been done on this. I still have concerns with the quantum of funding and the prioritisation of where it's going.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. And this has been a long journey, it seems, but I just want to pass on my thanks, and I'm sure I can speak for my colleagues, to Carleen, your staff, that have done an amazing amount of work. This has been a very hard juggle in the conditions in the city that we are in. But we all love our city and we want it to move forward, so that's really the priority. So I think that this long-term plan has really achieved a lot of things. You know, people have already talked about the concern over the debt headroom, the cost share and the gaps that it have left and the true cost of that, but we have to move forward. And one of those things, and Leanne pointed it out with regards to, we are councillors elected in a ward, but the ward that we represent is the Christchurch Inc., or all the wards of Christchurch. And part of that is to make sure that there is economic benefit, positive economic benefit to the city. So I am absolutely really chuffed that we are moving forward the multi-use arena to 2021-24. I think that's outstanding, and I really look forward to working with the Minister for Christchurch, Dr. Megan Woods, in achieving as best cost savings we can for the best value that we can get. There is a concern there, though, that we do not lose the vision of what that is all about putting that economic benefit into the central city and other places in Christchurch. So those private partnerships that we look at, we must be really careful about what they want, and we've got to keep our focus on what's best for Christchurch Inc. Secondly, with regards to what we heard from our communities about road safety, and it's great to have it in there that the council gives high and immediate priorities for increased road maintenance and road safety, specifying intersections and around schools, and that is absolutely crucial to all our immediate communities. And it's great to see it's the additional capital expenditure starting for 2018-19 increasing by 5.1 million and increasing from that over the next few years. So I think that is essential, and I look forward to working with staff about how we achieve that in our communities and all our communities. The final thing, seeing I've got just under a minute, is the integrity of this council. I talk about the elected members, not the council staff. We've put in this long-term plan the schedule of rates increases starting at 5.5 and decreasing in the next 5 years to 5%, and the final 5 years of this long-term plan from 4% to 2.9%. We just had a discussion earlier on about putting in something that may well affect rates increases further down the track. But those people in our city that are on fixed incomes need to be able to have faith in this council that they can plan and adjust for the future. And if we're going to just throw things in without taking things out, I'm sorry, I just cannot stand that. We've got to give really good, firm ground to those on fixed benefits and fixed incomes. So I really think we've achieved this, and in 10 years going down to 2.9, achieving everything that we have set out to do, looking forward and positively to the future for all our communities. I think it's going to be, I think we've achieved it, and thank you again very much to the staff and my colleagues.
Thanks, Tim. Glenn.
Okay. Thank you. By way of preparation for this, I had a quick look at international and also national surveys on the issues that matter the most. For New Zealanders, they included economic issues, housing/homelessness second, social issues, environmental issues, etc. And that's from a Roy Morgan poll, the latest that I could find. For what it's worth, I surveyed my own household, and the youngest two, they said save the environment. One said vegetarian butchers, and he also said, and make the hydroslide at QE2 free because you're the councillor. Yeah. And I, went to say, well, there are limits, but they go to a place called Unlimited. But when I surveyed the older ones in the home, they talked about getting rid of the chlorine in the water, fixing the roads, but also having a stadium. And I think that last bit actually sums up where many in the city are. It's not necessarily a straight out kind of dichotomy between one or the other. We live in a strange tension of needs. We do have to attend to the most basic, and I can definitely say in my part of the world that fixing the roads is a community well-being issue for many. You can't get away from that. As is putting back community facilities so that people have a place to go in the long journey to recovery. My sense is that this tension of needs will remain in our city for some time, and that it won't be easily resolved, and that of course we feel it as the local decision makers, but that at some point we just have to push the go button and make hard decisions which will also be at times unpopular. Just quickly looking at a couple of other issues, the red zone presents for us an amazing opportunity to do something different. Just a bit of training recently took me out to Bottle Lake, and even in deplorable weather, people love nothing more than just getting into the outdoors, walking their dogs, running, cycling, whatever. And I think in the red zone, if we can provide a great amenity there for people to enjoy, that will be part of their recovery as well. It can also be a carbon sink and part of us leading the way as a city. In terms of housing, what I would say about social housing, when you provide for it, it's a bit like spark plugs in a car. It goes well. You take one of the spark plugs out, it starts to chug and fall to bits. Housing is a system. You need every part of the system functioning well, or it falls to bits, as we can see with the, I think it's 23,000 homeless on the streets of Auckland. So we're in the hundreds as far as I'm aware, but we do need to pay attention to each part. No good having a stadium if people come here and see people living on the streets. So let's, attend to all the work we can across our housing program, and ask for your support on that.
Thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, here we go. They sometimes say quit when you're ahead. Never heeded well to that warning. Hence got myself in plenty of situations, and today won't be any different. I always see myself as the odd one in, and that's why I will start by first thanking the Mayor and my fellow councillors for getting something that's been dear to my community, which is around a particular intersection, and we've got a way forward. We'll see a report back to our community board in September with some options, and we'll see what the community says and the community board says about that at that time, and move on. So that's all my good bits. There's some great parts in this LTP. I think Christchurch does have, for most parts, a really good future ahead of it. The present, with still plenty of bits broken, isn't so good, especially for those in particular parts of the city, businesses in the inner city, people who live in the east, and everyone drinking chlorine. I've always been totally opposed to chlorine, and probably always will be, and I think it's a complete have. But beyond that, I received an email yesterday from someone in Burnside who's got a family of 4, and the guy clearly stated that his rates bill is 1 month's wages. So one of his entire, and he's still got to pay insurance, and he's still got to pay his mortgage, and he's got to pay for his kids' school fees and lunches and everything else they do as a family. But 1 month's income is just rates. And I think our rates are out of control in Christchurch. I think 5.5% is far too high. We should be a lot closer to the rate of inflation. The difference here between, I think, most of my fellow councillors and myself is I'm cheap. I'm a cheap guy. I think I see myself as pretty average. I grew up in average neighbourhoods, and even if I could afford a Ferrari, I'd never buy one. I'd always buy a Ford, most likely. My wife wouldn't let me buy most of the ones I like, but if I was spending the council's money, it would just be a Toyota because it's reliable and does the job. What we haven't done in this LTP is engage the public enough. We've had feedback from less than 1% of the population, and so yeah, we've kind of got a mandate, legally speaking, but we don't actually have a mandate from the people because they haven't told us exactly what they want, or more to the point, what they don't want. And those are the conversations going forward that I think a lot more councils and governments need to have with their populations, is about how not to spend money. A lot of stuff we build, and I look at community facilities, and the one that was removed from St Albans on Colombo Street, what was called the Lion's Den, I thought was a stunning facility. I hired it a number of times myself. I thought it was really good value for money. It was a really good building. The cost of that one is just over 10% of the cost of the one we will build. And so that cost differential is just far too huge. We need to curb our spending. We haven't done it we haven't asked enough questions around that in this LTP, and I look forward to those conversations we will hopefully have going forward, because I think I speak for a silent majority, the 99% of the population, not all of them, because I know a number of them hate me, I said on staff, but that don't engage with us, and I look forward to them engaging with us more in the future.
Phil?
Thank you. I join others certainly in thanking the staff for a huge amount of work, and also my fellow councillors. I think there's some, since we went out for consultation, there's some significant improvements that we are making, and one that stands out for me is the area of social housing, and the recommendation to support the $30 million loan for a social housing provider. That I think that's very timely. We know that there's a desperate need for single and double bedroom units in social housing. The figures from the Greater Christchurch Partnership are very worrying in terms of the future number of older people who are going to be only on superannuation, and other people with disabilities. So, like I understand that our current wait list, for example, for social housing is over 500 people. And one of our submitters, you might remember, said to us, what if one of those 500 was your grandmother? So what answer have you got to that, they said. Well, I actually think by actually now putting in out the loan for the 30 million, that in fact we will get the social housing, which our staff have suggested that we will. And they have estimated that over a 3-year period, in fact, we could get 190 social housing units built, and that would be over an 8-year period too, we'd be looking at 500. Those are the figures that staff have previously given me. So the other area too that I think there's been strong support for, but also I think we've been cautioned about, is in the area of cycleways. I think what we're doing is really good. As I've indicated, I wasn't prepared to have the rates put up because of them. But I think putting in the two, particularly besides what was voted today with the Heathcote cycleway, Quarryman's Trail and parts of the Northwest Arc, will go a long way towards achieving what we want as a city for a network and a system of cycling. And we certainly heard from an older submitter of the value for older people cycling, and also the value for people's health and their future care. The other area that came through strongly for me, and it's close to my heart, was the area of heritage, and there was strong support from submitters that we bring forward back the landmark fund of $1.5 million. And I think it's quite clear that these landmark buildings, for example, like the old post office in the square, and also the state insurance building, and there's the Peterborough Quarter, they have been part of Christchurch's identity, and that's something that I think that this budget attempts to do in terms of keeping a balance. It's keeping the things that are important to people. And I think the public spoke very clearly about the importance of having a multi-use arena, and that will give the, I'm certainly think that that will give the public certainty as well as the other aspects of our budget. So I certainly commend the Mayor's recommendations.
Thank you. Dion.
I look at this budget as a 3-stage thing. Getting the basics right, or identifying getting those basics right, getting things done, and then delivering. And I think the key part is actually delivery for us now. We're spending a lot of money. This budget, if you look through it, there's a lot of money being spent on things in our city, getting things done, and getting the basics right. I remember sitting here when we adopted the draft long-term plan and saying I was disappointed that we weren't maintaining our core basic infrastructure, and I'm really happy that we are now at least can say to our communities that the city's foundation, what we build everything else upon, is actually going to be solid. It's not going to deteriorate any further than it already has, because we're spending a lot of money on the health of our city. We want to be a well-being city. We need a healthy city that actually people can build upon and actually want to invest in, want to live in, and actually get or to build a life upon. I'm really happy to see a lot of momentum still staying within the central city, because we need to attract people to live in our central city. We don't have that at the moment. We're still 2,000 people living, or 2,000 people less living in the central city than when the earthquake happened, and we've got a long way to go to attracting more people to build there. The getting things done part that I said in the second part is around the governance and decision-making process and the Mayor's recommendations here around developing a committee for establishing a committee for the capital program. The council's doing around 900 projects at the moment. I don't think many people in the city recognise how many projects this council is actually doing right now. Some of them are from just several $1,000s and some are several $100 million. But 900 projects to govern to get things done in our city is a massive achievement, and we actually need to have a very strong governance oversight on that. And I'm really happy that we're actually going to establish something in that respect, so that we can actually start looking at how we, we're talking about value engineering or value adding. So we can actually stop wasting money in areas that don't need to be wasted and actually prioritise where money can actually be spent, because there is a limited amount of money, and that's the next part about delivery. Delivering all these projects is going to be tricky for the city. Our debt levels are going to soar, and it's the next generation that's going to have to look at that debt level. How do we pay for it? At the moment we're borrowing, but I really think that in the future we're going to have to look at our assets and prioritise how we actually manage our assets, how we own our assets, and what partnerships we can bring to the city so that we can actually start paying for and actually enhancing the city's how the city operates. So I'm pleased that we're getting the basics right. I'm pleased that we're going to be looking at how we deliver, get things done, and but the caution that I do have from my point of view is how we're going to pay for everything in the future.
Pauline.
Yeah, that's true. We did hear a lot of submitters talking about core business, but I'd like to remind people that our roads and footpaths and Three Waters is actually well over 50% of our spend. But even then, we've now increased the funding that we'll be putting into our repairs of our footpaths and roads, and also into our renewals program, because we've listened. And we've also made provisions to up the maintenance of our parks and renewals, and including resourcing our park rangers, which I think is a really neat thing, because that feeds into education programs and all sorts of wonderful things. We also heard from our submitters about community facilities, though. They're really important, along with our footpaths and roads. And I agree that these do form the heart of our communities, and it was our strong communities that really helped us get through the terrible disaster of the earthquake. So we've provided $170,000 to begin investigative work into the where, what, how, when for any new ones, and I think that's a really good start. And also we're continuing work on building collaborative relationships with our residents and communities. And I note in the Mayor's forward you've said that we want to work with our communities, not just for our communities, and I think that's a really strong statement. It's also supported strongly by the grant to the Edgeware Pool. It indicates we're walking the talk here, finally recognising that this is a great project and recognising the durability and the passion and desire for the return of their pool. And that's worthy of support. And I know that we'll build an enduring relationship there, because that's what it's about. It's not just saying, here you go. It's actually walking alongside communities. And this will be a great example of how we'll do things in the future, as Dion referred to. So along with the earthquake, the floods, the fires, we now have the chlorination issue to deal with, and the upgrading of our drinking water infrastructure, which is a good thing, and I think we've stepped up to this really well. And plus, as I mentioned before, additional funding for roads and footpaths. And we're still keeping the rates capped at 5.5, nothing short of a miracle in my view. And I know people still think that's high, and it is for some people, no one's disputing that. But we do, as Dion also said, we do need to fund all these things somehow. So it's actually a good balance of our core responsibilities here, with moving forward, as in keeping the momentum in the city, which is really happening, and also getting our core business done. That balance is really, really important. We've based our decisions on the feedback we've heard through the submission. So in a way, we've got here today together with our residents. Not everyone gets what they want, but I feel we've done the best to provide a balanced way forward for the City of Christchurch. And I want to thank everyone around this table, all the staff, but also the members of the public who've engaged with us to get us to this point today.
Mike.
Thank you. I think there's some really good aspects of the long-term plan, and we've definitely changed a few things from the draft to show that we are starting to get the basics right. You know, focusing on our drinking water, especially at a time when obviously the chlorination issue is hugely important, and putting enough money on budget to sort that out is important, not just for the short term over the next 8 months, but also the longer term, to make sure our city is never permanently chlorinated. Spending more money on wastewater, I think, is really, really important, and we heard that a lot. It's also good to see extra money put into local road maintenance, and also safety. You know, you just have to walk around parts of Shirley just to see what those people have to live with: broken footpaths, broken streets, endless constructions from the Dudley Creek works. You know, community wellbeing is hugely important, and you know, if fixing the roads helps that community wellbeing, then we need to do it. You know, it's time we listen to the people and act accordingly. There's been a lot of debate over the cycleways, and it's really good to see that we are still pushing through the cycleways, and we've pulled another couple forward, and we've got enough money on budget that once the NZTA release their financial assistance rates, there's potential to speed them up and get them completed as originally planned. Although there's a lot of comments that the cycleways aren't wanted, I think that's completely wrong. You just have to look at the long-term plan submissions to see that support of the cycleways drew the most submissions, 282. And the majority of them were asking for the cycleways to be brought forward. And when you look at the negative ones, actually, even the resident survey, there's actually not that many negative comments. You know, 26 negative comments on cycleways does not mean the city does not want it. You know, I've spoken to many people around New Zealand and Christchurch. We know we're the envy of the other cities. They want to be like us. This is the perfect place for cycling, and what we've done so far, we've seen increase in cycling numbers, and we know how important that is for a city moving forward as the growth continues to go. You know, currently we're building the corridor, which is just going to funnel thousands and thousands of extra vehicles into one of our older suburbs, St Albans. You know, that's not going to fix congestion. That's going to make it worse. And I know we went out in the consultation, talked about a fuel tax. You know, that's not the answer. We need to look at congestion levies. We can't have people of Waimakariri coming into Christchurch and not contributing to actually the congestion that they are causing. So look, there's some good things, but for me, it's something I've said right from the start. Our rates are too high. They're way too high. You know, it's a 10-year program, and at the second half of it, they are getting lower. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if we could actually stick to that 10-year program. Long-term plans every 3 years, so I'm looking at the next 3 years, and I see huge pressure on a number of people. You know, just cutting our cloth in these tight times could have easily saved 1% each year on our rates. We're spending $20 million on private heritage over the next 10 years. That is way too much. You know, we're going to be giving Christchurch NZ an additional $1.2 million on top of their $10 million every year. It's just too much at this point of time. You know, we just need to be a little bit more prudent with our spending just to get over this tough patch. And I just think we've missed the mark with that.
Sarah.
Thank you. I'd just like to start with our strategic directions, which we're adopting through this process: climate change leadership, active citizenship and connected communities, increasing active and public transport use, a prosperous and sustainable city, proactive approach to natural hazards and a safe and sustainable water supply with improved waterways. They are future focused and will enable us to become a more resilient city and closely reflect what our community has told us through the LTP consultation. However, as Joe Biden famously said, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. And you know what, this budget, our budget, doesn't quite match our well-intentioned words in many aspects, and our community has told us this through their submissions. But that's not for the lack of trying on our part to get this right, to balance all the calls from residents, and we also have funding issues still to be sorted. We're awaiting the government's new transport GPS to be finalised and the NZTA funding assistant rates. We still have the business cases and the Capital Acceleration Fund to go, and a global settlement with the government for outstanding matters, all of which will allow us to spend more and get more essential work done without the impact falling on ratepayers. I know that many will be disappointed that we have not brought forward all of the cycleways projects. They were the most positively commented on aspect of the LTP. But without the NZTA funding rates confirmed, it was simply too much of a hit on rates. However, all 13 MCRs are still on budget and we have added enough funding to complete them. The cycleways, all the national and international evidence is clear, and the new government direction is to use this evidence to build a transport system that actually works. Christchurch is growing, and we do not want to end up with Auckland's congestion and disconnected communities. We have a chance to be much better than that. I think we've got it pretty much right with our community facilities, but was stunned when Matuku Takataku, the Sumner Community Centre, opened, and this award-winning building was only open to the community for 3 hours total on the weekend. So putting some additional funding in to have the library and community centre and public toilets open for longer hours on Saturday and Sundays is really welcomed. While the coastal pathway is in the later years of the LTP, I'm really pleased that we've put on budget enough money to get the difficult Monks Bay section complete. The new plan for the GPS to fund footpaths should help make this much cheaper for ratepayers once those rates are finalised. I will be having my vote recorded against a few of the recommendations, so I'll just say a few words why. Now, I'm in favour of a stadium and have been convinced by my colleagues that it needs a roof. However, I'm not in favour of bringing it forward 2 years. And in fact, only 28 submitters asked us to do that. For me, it's stadium versus core city infrastructure. The two key reasons given for bringing the stadium forward, certainty and it's cheaper to build it the sooner you do it, are the same for our core infrastructure. We need to have the confidence that our wastewater and drinking water are up to modern standards, and it will never be cheaper to do it now. The stadium will be a nice to have, but it simply isn't as important as getting our core infrastructure up to scratch as soon as possible. I'm trying to cut it now because I've got too much left to say. I can do more another time. Only a month ago, the Council narrowly passed a resolution to allow the Capital Endowment Fund inflation proofing to be used for the next 3 years. I only voted in favour of this because it was going to be for community uses. All of the economic stuff had been used up, and so I'll be voting against it being used for the Christchurch NZ portion there. And I'm disappointed that we have not even inflation-proofed our community grants, and know that the many community groups who submitted to us will be as well. I'm not looking forward to the really tough decisions that we'll have to make in the Metropolitan Strengthening Communities funding round in September. Anyway, I'm looking forward to next year and the additional funding that we will have to truly become a 21st century sustainable and prosperous city.
Jamie.
Thanks. I won't speak to the LTP on the whole because that's for Tuesday, but I will briefly touch on the amendments here.
No, it's all now.
Oh, we're going to do it all now?
It's all now. That's why
I will speak to the LTP on the whole today, and not on Tuesday.
Everyone agreed that
No,
we'll do
it's
it.
all right.
We'll do it once and we'll do it well.
No, yeah, exactly. No, good idea, Willa.
Called getting synergies.
Yes, yeah, synergies are good. Okay, thanks, Jazz. Well, I will be speaking to the LTP on the whole today and not Tuesday. So thank you very much for listening. Suggesting the deferral of funding for a local pool, additional park ranger funding, enviro stalls, green prescriptions and a swim program, and the exploration of a fuel tax. These are all items that I haven't supported in these amendments here. I don't get a lot of pleasure from saying no to these things because I think they're all good causes, but our role is about making those hard calls. No one ever said it was going to be easy. Identifying what you think you could do without is always way tougher than saying what you could live with or what you could do with. I'm not in favour of bringing forward the major cycleways routes when our roads and footpaths remain in the state they're in. A clear message that we did hear from the community is the importance of the expedited multi-use arena. I'm very much in favour of this and bringing the funding forward, and I'm very supportive and endorse our clear intention for it to be a closed roof facility. Missing that opportunity would just be a travesty. So whilst some people, and actually a lot of people, would say that that stadia is a nice to have, why I think it's a need to have for the city is because there's been a tremendous amount of investment that has gone in on the basis that this would happen, and we've got to honour that. The reality is the Crown and the Council ain't going to rebuild Christchurch. It's largely going to be the private sector, and we can do our part, but fundamentally it has to come from external sources. And I think that the Crown and the councils need to hold up their end of the bargain. I am in favour of the back to basics approach, so I do endorse that theme, but I think the biggest concern that I hold is the level of rates rises, and that needs to be top of mind. And I don't think this is isolated to Christchurch. I think this is a local government problem across the nation, that the level of rates rises are completely unsustainable, and ultimately that house of cards will fall down because they are rising at levels far faster than inflation and what people's wages are at. So at one point it's going to come home, and we're going to have to look at that. We're going to tackle the UAGC, or the Uniform Annual General Charge, next year, and that's been signalled in the Mayor's recommendations. I welcome that. It's still not going to be the silver bullet. And I think the last point I'll make on rates is that I think people can swallow the fact that they're not always going to be even, and that's okay so long as they're fair. And the problem with our rating system is that it isn't fair. I've got a young couple that I know. He works a 9-to-5 job as an operations manager, and she has a small business that employs 2 to 3 people. Their rates are 30 grand because they live in Fendleton. Their house is also as is where is. That is simply not fair. It's a blunt instrument at a wealth tax, and someone's capital value isn't actually a good indication of someone's wealth at the end of the day. So we're going to have to look at that. We're not doing that today though, and the UAGC is going to be a start. But the final point that I'll make is that I'm heartened by our commitment to be chlorine free as fast as humanly possible. I commend the Mayor's stance on this, and I'd really like to make it very clear that all of us around the council are unanimous in our desire to have this toxin gone from our water supply as soon as we possibly can. And I think that not one person in Christchurch will begrudge our commitment that if we're going to gold plate one thing, that it will be our water supply. So well done to the Mayor, to my colleagues, and especially to staff for all their hard work on this. It's a long-term plan that's compromised from everyone, but our one job is to sign off a budget, and we'll be able to do that.
Thank you. Anne.
Mō tātou, mō kā iore muri ake nei, for us and our children after us. This long-term plan is not just about making decisions that affect us today, but we are making decisions that will directly affect the lives of our children and their children after them. Thank you, Leanne, for your recommendations that I am delighted to support. Thank you too to my fellow councillors and to staff for the combined effort and huge amount of work that's gone into getting us to this place. I think these recommendations reflect both what we have heard from our communities about what we should focus on, and also it aligns beautifully with our strategic priorities that we will also be signing off that we all agreed upon when we first started this journey as a council. So we want our city to be one that has a water supply that is pure and fresh and clean and safe to drink. We want a city that enables active citizenship and connected communities. We want one that maximises opportunities to develop itself into a vibrant, prosperous and sustainable 21st century city. And we want one that takes leadership in addressing climate change and making informed and proactive approaches to natural hazard risks. And we want one that increases active public and shared transport opportunities and to use safe and to be a place where our children are able to walk safely to school. I canvass some of my local young people, and they the first thing that they want from us is to be able to walk, bike and scooter to school safely. So I'm delighted that we have got this focus. We're bringing funds to improving our safety around our streets, our local streets, so that parents can be confident that their children are able to travel to school using active transport in a safe way. They won't have to bring them to school in their cars, which will mean less congested roads and alleviate the safety issues around schools as congestion is an ongoing issue. So I think that this long-term plan provides reassurance to them that we have heard their voices and we are listening to them, and we are we're making this city what it should be for them. I'm confident that by adopting these recommendations, we're satisfying the needs for good economic outcomes for our city by providing jobs, but we're also funding the social housing to rebuild back to pre-earthquake levels, which means that we're showing that we're a compassionate and caring city. So I'm delighted to be supporting these recommendations, and I'm confident that this LTB will position our city as one that has a reputation for being a city of opportunity for all going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Firstly, can I just acknowledge my colleagues and staff for the collaboration and work we've done over the last 9 months plus. Generally, I've been a very strong advocate of attending to core functions of the council, roading, three waters, essential community services. The Mayor's forward and Mayor's recommendations, I'm generally supportive of everything we have before us today, and I'd like to acknowledge the commitment to South Brighton, South Shore and the Sticks areas, and we'll be looking to positive and equitable actions following completion of the regeneration strategy and also rephasing of the land drainage recovery program budgets for the Sticks remedial actions. I've made some points where I'm opposed to aspects of the Mayor's recommendations, roading and footpaths. There are many and desperate needs across the city, including in my area in the east. One thing I'm very keen to see happen, and we did talk about it from the external advisory group, is prioritising of the remedial works of the worst roads in Christchurch and then attending to that. I don't see that happening in any great degree yet. Cycleways, I'm not against cycleways per se, but I am extremely concerned about some of the designs and options that we have enacted around the city, and we've divided communities over some of those. Although numerous submissions were received in favour of it, many conversations that I have around town, people express their concern and around the extent and number of cycleways. Social housing, again, I'm not against social housing. I consider it not a core function for council and would ultimately like to see council housing totally separate from all council operations and independently operated. The multi-purpose arena, I'm exceedingly and totally supportive of advancing the funding in the LTP for this project, and endorse all the comments that Tim Scandrett made earlier in his presentation. Alternative funding. I'm all up for investigating alternative sources. The fuel tax I'm opposed to at this stage until we get some parity of cost of fuel across the country and avoid this South Island subsidisation of fuel. Headroom is a big concern for me, and I note that we will sort of be around that 21% in a few years' time, and I really do consider it's time to consider options around seeking strategic partners in selling down some of our strategic assets. It's not selling assets, it's accessing funding from our assets and still retaining majority shareholding and control of these assets. And finally, I'd just like to endorse, I think, everybody's comments around the room that we need to accelerate as fast as possible the chlorination removal of our waterway and get on with it. I think Jamie said pretty much everything else I'd like to say about that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Chen.
Thank you. Kia koutou, annyeonghaseyo, ni hao, ni hao, ni hao, konnichiwa, namaste, buenos dias, talofa lava, buna, ayobowen, malunene, guten morgen, salam, mabuhay, the mayor, my fellow councillors, all the staff and all the audience, good morning. If we review the council strategic framework, consists of the vision of Christchurch, community outcomes, and the strategy are the priorities. I think we all see and we all agree that we want this city become a safe, clean, green, innovative, sustainable, inclusive, and international connections the city. So the long-term plan 2018 to 28 will be the most important, not only the strategic document, but also the powerful tool to achieve the community outcomes for this city. So I agree, most of the mayors, the recommendation. For instance, I agree, ensure our city, the drinking water supply is safe, secure, and unchlorinated. And also, I agree to maintain and renew the wastewater infrastructure. I also agree to reduce the flood risk of particular vulnerable area. That's a kind of in relation to our health and even to our lives. And also, I agree to improve our road and the footpaths, particularly those area in the poor condition. Also, I agree to support maintaining momentum in our city. However, I'm disappointed in two kinds of facilities. First one, I'm disappointed the council rephased the existing budget and push out 2 years of the new Southwest Leisure Center and the Library and Service Center facility. I consider very serious the timing of the funding for the Southwest area new facility and also the library. The Hornby area desperately we need such a new facility, and I'm totally committed to deliver this as soon as possible. So in a way that meets the needs of my community, I consider moving an amendment to have the funding pushed out by 1 year only, rather than the mayor's the recommendation for 2 years. However, I decided not to, as I realized there is a significant body of work to be done with the community to find a site for the new facilities. So I also understand that funding can be brought forward as necessary once this work has been done. So my key message to the people today is that I'm totally committed to delivering the new facility for the people of wider Hornby area and also for the people of Christchurch as quickly as possible. And I will do everything I can to make sure we get on this required work quickly. But generally speaking, I fully support this long-term plan. Thank you.
Very much. Ref Menji.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think this has been a good process in terms of discussing what is, still quite a complex financial situation for the council. I'm happy to support the Mayor's recommendations. I think they do reflect the basics, and they reflect resident surveys in terms of what the public expect us to be spending money on. Water supply. Every day people need water, drinking water, wastewater to flush away the waste, footpaths to walk on and roads to travel on, whether you're on a car, bike or a bus. These are really the basics that everyone needs to access every day, and I think it's right that some of that funding has come forward into those areas, so that's good. I just want to raise three general issues which weren't always covered in the plan, but I think we need to keep an eye to. One is the level of rates and debt. The rates increases are very difficult for ratepayers, and the debt headroom has crept up from our last LTP, where we did try to keep it at a 200% net to revenue ratio, and that is concerning. I don't think the demands on the city are going to lessen. So I do think we need to think or rethink partial asset sales. That will reduce debt. I think there's extra cash on our balance sheet that we could release over book value. That cash could be employed in extra investment. I also think the idea of listing our assets on the market actually is quite good for the city. Wellington and Auckland both have their airports listed. It's actually great. I mean, we need some more focus on Christchurch. We need to improve our brand as an open city, innovative and enterprising, and I think those are some of the extra benefits of having some of your assets listed. Remaining with 51% control means there's no issues there, so I think we need to reconsider that. I think also we need to present our financial information in a much more accessible way. With the technology that we have today around online tools, I think we need to get better at the way we present these reports. The LTP is still very old school, and we don't get a lot of people engaging in it. So I think one of the things we do need to work on is the way we present these budgets to make it more accessible and engaging for people, so they can actually understand where we're spending the money on and then reflect their feedback. I also think we need to take into account the impact of a potential global settlement with the Crown. It's long overdue. I hope that we will finish it by the end of this year. The use of the Capital Acceleration Fund and streamlining the post-earthquake structures such as Regenerate Christchurch and DCL, which should yield some savings and lead to a more efficient and understandable system for the people. So if I think we get those things done, we'll be in a good place, and hopefully we can deal with some of that stuff in the next annual plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking staff for all the work that they've done throughout the development of the plan. I'd like to thank the Mayor for her leadership, and I'd also like to thank council colleagues for the collaborative approach that we've taken to what at times have been quite difficult decisions, and I actually think all of that has been reflected very well in the meeting that we've had here this morning. I like also the fact that we've made changes to the plan as a result of the submissions that we've received and submissions that we've heard, and also as a result of the results of the recent resident satisfaction survey, and this has all led us to what really is more of a back to basics approach. So I welcome the focus on roads and footpaths. I'm pleased that there'll be an increased budget and a focus on Banks Peninsula roads as well as those in other areas, including a working party of the Banks Peninsula Community Board and community members to input into the prioritisation and into the good practice of Banks Peninsula road repairs and upgrades. I also welcome the focus on three waters. I'm pleased that we'll now not see any regression in the wastewater network. We've got work planned in the stormwater network, which is clearly aligned to the improvements that we need and want to make in those areas, and funding for priority work to get the chlorine out of the water within the signalled 12 months. I'm also pleased to see that there's now funding on budget for delivery of a fit-for-purpose drinking water scheme for O'Kane's Bay on Banks Peninsula. The bringing forward of improvements to the Diamond Harbour Wharf is a key investment in public transport infrastructure, and I'm also pleased to see that improvement work to the Akaroa Wharf will continue pretty much immediately, with design and consultation taking place over the next financial year. I'm also delighted that we've got in this plan over $10 million for development of the Naval Point area. This has been a long-awaited project which has got both local and metropolitan, possibly even regional benefits. And I'm pleased that this will now allow for the boat safety improvements that have been needed for some time, car parking interventions and the partnership opportunity with the Naval Point Club to be achieved, and improvements to the sports facilities which have been affected by the risk from the nearby oil tanks. I'm also pleased to see the $30 million for social housing in the plan and welcome the opportunity, as we've heard this morning, to look in detail at options for increasing the level of service for social housing in the next few months. So considering that we remain in a constrained and complex financial environment and with much work still to do, we've got a coherent financial strategy that with careful consideration and discipline has not required the divestment of our asset holdings, and in my view it doesn't need to. Whilst borrowing's high, it remains within acceptable debt to revenue ratios which are forecast to come back to more normal levels over time. Much of what we're building and spending has got intergenerational benefit, and it's entirely appropriate the costs are also borne across generations. We've got an infrastructure strategy that sees improvements to networks over the life of this plan, balancing that with taking into account community expectations around vertical infrastructure such as swimming pools and community centres, and we've achieved all of this within the previously signalled rates rise of 5.5%, with rates programmed to decrease overall to much reasonable levels during the life of this plan. And it's required discipline to remain within those increase envelopes, and I hope that future councils will retain that discipline so that we can get rates increases back to reasonable levels as early as possible. So overall, I think this is a good plan that we've put together in still quite a difficult situation, and I'm pleased to be able to support it today.
Thank you all very much. Look, can I just wrap up by saying again thank you to all of the staff involved. It's been an extraordinary effort to get to this point, and I know that there's still a little bit of work to be done, but thank you very much for all of that work. It has been outstanding. And I too want to thank all of my colleagues around the table. It's you know, sometimes it has to be a bit of give and take, and everyone's been prepared and willing to work collaboratively and to understand that, you know, not everyone agrees on the same set of priorities. Some of us have, you know, priorities in one area, others have priorities in another area. That it's all valuable. You know, that's how complex decisions are made, and we're in a complex environment. We have challenging issues that we have to confront. But you know, my experience is that we all listen to each other, and whether we agree or not, we respect the fact that we have all been elected to represent the people of Christchurch, and we're here with the best interests of the city at heart. So thank you to each and every one of you for the contribution that you have made. I also want to thank the over 1,500 people and organisations who submitted on our long-term plan, and just to also to make the point though that they weren't the only ones who participated. I know that community board members and councillors were out in shopping malls and various other places engaging with the public, and not all of them would have turned into submissions, but there was that connection made and people understood that there was a process going on that they could participate in. I know that a number also attended Residents Association meetings and Business Association meetings, and went to board meetings and various other group meetings around the city, and just engaged on the content of the long-term plan. We also, from a personal point of view, I do very much share concerns that have been expressed around the table around the level of debt. I do worry about where the headroom is heading, and although we've maintained you know, sufficient to get us by the prudential test, I think we are challenged to think about that a lot more carefully, and I want us to think about that certainly as we go forward from here. I'm also concerned about rates increases. The comparison that we make with other cities is always based on the average house price. And so, you know, I do receive the odd email from people sort of saying, I would pay a lot less in Auckland in my rates if I lived there compared to Christchurch. And I would like to take a picture of what a $500,000 investment in a house would buy in Auckland and send it back and say, but this is what you'd be living in, because the average house price is what the average rate represents. And so, and I kind of want to pick up on what one of the councillors said about, you know, the mechanism that rates represents. And actually, this is not a good way to provide or to fund services for a city of our size and scale, to have it purely based on the capital value of property isn't enough. You know, and we do have our asset base from which we do receive a rate of return, but it is a mixed rate of return across that asset mix, and I think that we do need to think very seriously about that and how we resolve for some issues. But again, that's for another occasion. But I think, you know, to look to central government to partner in new ways of delivering services that are much more connected with communities. Central government, local government partnerships are the way to go. And I think that the government, this government, well, actually the previous government as well, has established a core group within the Department of Internal Affairs which has the sole function of looking for that central government, local government partnership. And out of that, and all of the funding reviews that are going on at the moment, I hope that central government comes up with a better way of enabling us to fund core infrastructure at the same time as connecting with our communities, because, you know, the re-establishment of the four well-beings in legislation is very much a part of who we are as a city, you know, in terms of what we want to achieve. I'm going to be very focused on establishing the capital infrastructure, the capital program sort of oversight committee, or whatever it's going to be called. I can't think what a dreadful acronym that might make. But I will think of an appropriate one. But it will be a committee of the whole council, and I think will enable us to ensure that we are monitoring progress in a way that doesn't, well, on a no surprises basis is probably the best way for me to describe that. So again, thank you all very much. You know, these debates, actually I've really enjoyed the debate. I've really enjoyed listening to what everyone has had to say. So on that note, I shall put the motion. What? I thought we did. No. Do we have to? Can I put the vote and then come out of standing orders? Yeah, okay. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. And, sorry, we've got a couple more resolutions to go. Oops, what have I done? So we've passed all of those. So now, no, doing this in the right order. Mr. Thompson. That the council reinstates the standing orders suspended earlier in the meeting. I'll move that. Seconded by Mike. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And there is another resolution, which is that, and we took out the infrastructure strategy, didn't we? So that the council adopts the summary of the rates impact and net debt ratio impact, adopts the changes to the council's capital program D, E, F, H and L, yes, okay, so it was updated, attachment C. So, so that's been moved by me and seconded by you, Andrew? Yep, so I'll put that motion. Which is?
In regards to the development contributions policy, I don't see any specific reference to us adopting it today. In the last LTP, we did adopt a development contribution policy, and I'm just wondering if I've missed something.
Policy? Ian?
So we normally, it was my understanding that we would normally adopt a development contribution policy that sets, we don't need to? So we can do that any time. Okay, so just in terms of recording, like some of these resolutions, there's things that are obviously want recorded against.
There's a list of...
Sorry, we've already done that.
We've done it for your recommendations.
Yeah.
We haven't done it for this.
But yours is included in that. It's like 15k or something, 18k.
I don't know. There's others like the RONs or whatever you want to call it.
So you wanted to get the cathedral rate, is that right?
No, the cathedral rate is separate. That's we haven't done that yet, have we? We're not doing that till next week. We're not doing that till Tuesday. Yes?
18 or 15, whichever.
Right. So you're moving these at the moment.
Wait 1 minute. Di?
Yes, the decision was made a couple of years ago that the development contribution is not changed as at an LTP process. It's subsequently changed and consulted on after the LTP process because it's it relies on the capital program, which is only finished at the very last point. So it's currently unchanged. So if we were to adopt it, would be adopting it as it is currently sitting and with the view that it's being looked at.
That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah. So I just wanted my vote recorded then against the capital program.
Right. So you want to vote against adopting the proposed changes to the council's capital program set out in attachment D. So that's 2. Is that right? Right. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. And we've got... No, that goes. Let's cross that out. Delete. And...
We need some time.
This is where we stop. I think we've done
Yes.
all that we need to do. Now, so I'll just okay. Sorry? We've done that. So now we have adopted the recommendations as amended. We've adopted Carlene's report as amended, and we are now going to simplify the final version of the infrastructure strategy, which I'm really grateful to staff for putting in the effort to do this. I think it will really help it make it more accessible and a good starting point for the next one. And then we'll formally adopt the long-term plan on Tuesday. So we're almost there, and now I'll adjourn the meeting until 9:30 Tuesday morning. Thank you very much. Thank you.